Greetings, YouTube. I've spoken out in the past and said that I disagreed with the Libertarian Party's stance on fiscal issues. Well, actually, that's a bit of an understatement. I consider the Libertarian Party's stance on fiscal issues to be nothing but pure insanity. That it would hand the United States over to the 1% even faster than the GOP currently is attempting. So I don't need to really cover that again. I've covered it before. But I've come to the point where I realize that the social issues espoused by the Libertarian Party are almost as crazy. Now, some people will tell you, well, I disagree with their fiscal issues because, well, they are insane, but that they agree with their social standpoints because they are much more open-minded and egalitarian. And at first glance, they may seem to. For example, people could say, but Tetsubo, you believe that prostitution should be legal, and the Libertarian Party does. You're right, we agree on that. And they could say, but Tetsubo, you believe that drugs should be deregulated, and the Libertarian Party thinks that's also true. And I said, we agree on that. But even a broken clock is right twice a day. See, the Libertarian Party takes a extreme deregulation position. That essentially there should be no regulations except in the most absolute basic requirements. As long as there's an army, and the fire department functions and the police department functions, they pretty much don't want anything else. Whereas I want to make sure that every single American, from cradle to grave, never has to worry about food, shelter, education, healthcare, or safety, as far as their person, property, and nation is concerned. Pardon me there, Andrew, you're kind of in my way. And one of my issues is if you take this extreme deregulation idea and you start looking at it and you start picking it apart and you start thinking about, okay, if I extrapolate this far enough, what does it mean? Well, this is what you can get. Take, for example, Idaho, which is, I believe, the whitest state in America. Under a libertarian government, if which is kind of an oxymoron, I guess. If in Idaho the people were to say, all right, the white majority has just elected, put a law into effect that says that black people cannot shop in any store that puts a sign in the window that says, no black people allowed. That would be completely allowed under a libertarian government, because they would say the free market would then shake out so that the black citizens would shop where black citizens are welcomed, and the other business owners would be able to say, okay, I don't want black people in my stores because that's my personal worldview. But it's not hard to imagine that very quickly, every single store in Idaho would have a sign that said, no black people allowed. And the ones that didn't would then be able to gouge the black community as they wanted to, because there would be so few options for the black people to go to, they wouldn't have any options. There would be no choice. There would be no free market left for a black person in Idaho. And I'm not picking on Idaho, I believe it's the whitest state, so it's a good example. And of course that does leave, where does the brown and the yellow and the red people fall into that category? Maybe they just say no minorities allowed, or whites only. That's a nice broad category. Utah doesn't allow same-sex marriage at the moment. But what if they elected laws into power that said, or put laws into power that said that you can't be gay in the state of Utah, and if you are discovered to be gay in the state of Utah, that you will be arrested and jailed and left to rot. Under a libertarian government, the majority could put such a law into power because there would be no regulations to prevent them. So you see where I'm going with this. All of these concepts at first wash. Don't look that bad. But when you start to extrapolate how deep they can go, that deregulations on the level that the Libertarian Party is espousing are dangerous to the very core of democracy. That we need laws that protect the minorities from the tyranny of the majority. And we need those. Whether it's a single gay person in the entire state of Utah or an entire class of people in America, we need to make sure that no minority is ever treated less equally than the majority. That we need an open and egalitarian society where everyone is treated equally under the law, and libertarian positions state categorically that that is not the case, that the law should not be applied equally. Now, some will say, well, those people or those groups could then sue. How well is a case in Idaho under a libertarian government going to go if the majority of people and all of the people in positions of power are white? How is that going to go for those black people? And of course, it won't go well for them at all. But then the libertarians can say, well, the system works. They sued, they lost, and that's just what happens. See? It's perfect. Yes, it's perfect if you are a member of the majority. And what always seems to amaze me is that when you do this kind of a concept, that you make a law, set up a law so that it benefits the majority and imposes harsh penalties on a minority, eventually those roles can change. So that the majority can eventually become a minority, which is going to probably happen in America eventually. Caucasian people will eventually be brought out of existence here because Caucasian people are just a group. We are currently the majority, but we will not always be the majority. There are more non-white people in the world than white people. That's just the way it is. It's not good or bad, it's just what it is. And so, why don't you set the laws up so that regardless of who is in charge, everyone is treated equally under the law? So that no majority can ever oppress a minority. So that no matter where you live or under whose control you are, as far as the government is concerned, you will be treated the same way by the court systems and by the laws of the nation. That your race, creed, color, religious or political affiliation, that your sex, gender, or orientation, that none of it will matter. A future where there won't even be gender questions on job applications or anything else. Where no one will ask you what gender you are because it won't friggin' matter. Because we'll just accept people for what they are, people. Well, you'll never have to worry about answering a question on a census report about what your ethnicity is because it will no longer matter. You will just be a citizen of America. Wouldn't that be nice? I think it would be nice. And the extreme deregulation position espoused by the Libertarian Party is an antithesis to this. I can never say that word right, I apologize. It is the opposite of freedom and democracy. It is the opposite of equality under the law. And why am I talking about this today? Because I've just been having a conversation with someone on the Young Turks thread about the very nature of regulations for its financial sector when I discovered that this individual was in fact a libertarian. And it got me thinking while I was folding my laundry, you can hear the dryer in the background, that I can no longer give any credence to the Libertarian Party, not on fiscal or social issues. And so I felt a need to speak out and talk about it today. Now, I know that some of my viewers in the past and my subscribers have espoused libertarian views, and I apologize if I've insulted you. It is not my intent. I just can't remain silent on this any longer. There isn't anything that the Republican Party or the Democratic or the current leadership of the Democratic Party do, or the current Libertarian Party does, or the Tea Party that does, that I can endorse. There are individual candidates in the Democratic Party that I do support. Warren is one of them. But for the most part, I consider them all to be a variety of conservative. And that's what we don't need. Now, I still vote almost always Democratic because my options are vote for the Democrat or I help the Republican to win. If it's a Democrat Green, I would vote Green, but in New Hampshire, we don't have many Democrat Green races. If I ever see one, though, Green's got my vote. So, I'm not really sure if I want to listen to the comments down below, but I'm going to anyway. So this has been my particular position on why I don't like the Libertarian Party's stance on social issues. Comment away.